Welcome back to Close Up. As this epic midterm clash gets underway, we wanted to get inside perspective on campaigns and politics from practitioners who might be able to speak more freely than the folks who've been running this cycle. So let's debut what I think should be called Steve versus Steve. We have Steve Marchand, the former mayor of Portsmouth and a two-time candidate for governor, and Steve Negron, twice the Republican nominee for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Steve.
Thank you. Good to see you. Yes.
So let's start with an easy one here. At the beginning of this year, it looked like it was a slam dunk for Republicans, but the winds have kind of shifted, and now everyone kind of has reason for optimism here and there. But Mr. Negron, how do you rate the chances of Republicans up and down the ballot in 2022?
Well, I rate them very well, because one of the issues I think that Republicans are going to have to do is that they have to bring to the forefront those things that are hurting people every day at the kitchen table, right? And those things that are happening affect not only Republicans, independents, and Democrats, right? So I just got my electric bill, and it was over twice as much from a year ago when I did a little analysis. So I think what they need to do is they need to look at those things that affect everybody up and down, not just Republicans, get to those issues, bring those issues to the forefront, and I think that'll give them an opportunity to be successful.
Steve Marchand, what do you think? Can Democrats not just hold on, but perhaps make some gains?
Absolutely. This is the most optimistic I've been as a Democrat about this midterm. Really since the inauguration. We all know the history, anybody that follows it. Usually the first midterm of a new president of either party is not a pretty occurrence. And that's been true my entire adult lifetime. And I'll tell you, as I travel the state with my own political activism, 6 or 9 months ago, I would have said, we need to try to mitigate what could be a very difficult night for Democrats. Most folks watching, though, notice for a lot of reasons, both macro reasons, what's happening with the economy, inflation coming down, President Biden's approval rating going up, as well as things that we do control, the quality of our candidates here at home in New Hampshire, and frankly, respectfully to Steve, some of the quality of the Republican nominees from this past Tuesday's primary. These are matchups. A lot of factors are working in our direction. I'm extremely bullish, not just of holding on, but actually making gains here in New Hampshire and even at the federal level.
Let's drill down on some issues. The two big ones, obviously, inflation and abortion, going to be kind of clashing on each other as we talk about these things over the next couple of months. Steve Negron, what do you think? You're a strongly pro-life candidate. How would you be navigating this issue now that has gone back to the states, but the Supreme Court said it's open to the people and their representatives, so the Congress could act.
Right.
Do voters, do you think they are buying this argument, saying strongly pro-life people are going to go to Congress, but leave it to the states and not voted on it in Washington?
Sure. Well, that's a great question, Adam. And that's one of the things I think why the Democrats want to use this as a talking point is that, it is a lightning rod, right? It's been for years, Republicans were life guns taxes, right? And so what the Supreme Court has said in the Hobbs decision is that it's going to go back to the states. And I'm for that. We fought for 50 years to get out the big government out of telling people what to do in this specific issue. And I think by giving it back to the states and giving it to the people who elect their representatives, that's where the people have most of a voice. It isn't a one-size-fits-all from Washington. And so I believe now that you're going to see a lot of people saying, okay, give it back to the states. Well, quite frankly, most things should happen. The Republicans are about lesser government. And I think this was a landmark decision, bringing it back to the states. And I think the Democrats want to keep it up to the forefront. I think Republicans are going to say, look, the decision's been made, it's back to the states. Let's talk about those pressing issues that hurt everybody today.
Steve Marchand, on the inflation issue, and you can respond a little bit and we'll get some back and forth going, but Democrats are in power. As you were hinting at, the midterms tend to be difficult for the party in power, and there are economic pressures being exerted on people, and particularly as we hit the next couple of months, these electric bills and heating bills are going to start going up. So how would you be navigating this if people are saying, hey, you're in charge right now and things are going bad for me?
Well, first on the electric bills, which I know you both have mentioned, that is one of the few issues that actually there is some impact locally and at the statewide level, and that's something that Governor Sununu is going to have to deal with, some of these higher electric prices that people are seeing. So that's one that I think actually kind of boomerangs in a negative direction for Republicans, because there was an opportunity to do some things about it, especially over the last several years, and frankly, inaction has helped exacerbate the problem that we face today. On inflation more broadly, gas prices are, for a lot of folks, the proxy that people use in everyday language for what inflation really means. We had, rather high gas prices for some period of time. We now see over 1 out of 10 gas stations in the country where gas is already below $3 a gallon. It is expected by the end of October that the national average will be approaching $3 or a little under $3 a gallon. As a reminder to the viewers, In September of 2019, when President Trump was in office, and before the pandemic, which has scrambled everything, gas was about $2.60 a gallon. By the time we get to late October into November, gas prices aren't going to be that different, and that's even before you take into account 3 years of what normal inflation would normally have done to it. The last thing I'll say about inflation, the most stubborn element of inflation tends to be housing. It is an enormous expense for people. We have seen inflation in housing. The driver of inflation that is affected most by increases in the interest rate tends to be housing because of what it does to mortgage rates. We're already seeing some dampening down of home prices, days on the market. It's slowing down what was a white-hot real estate market that has a bit of a lag effect. But I think what we will see in the next few months is real impact in terms of slowing down the increase in housing prices, which is probably the biggest remaining driver of inflation costs. But gas is what most people look at first, rightly or wrongly, and that has gone down dramatically over the last few months, and it will continue to go down. Let's
talk about two big names that aren't on the ballot but are really kind of driving the election narrative, and that would be former President Trump and President Biden. If you were on the ballot this time around, you'd be dealing with these questions. So, Steve, who's the bigger drag, do you think? Is it Biden on the Democrats or Trump on the Republicans?
Well, clearly it's Biden on the Democrats, you know. And to my esteemed colleague, Steve, you know, my father used to have a famous saying that said, you know, if you dig yourself a hole and then build the greatest ladder to get out, you don't get credit for the ladder. So if you have to look at when Biden's administration took office and where we were, inflation is still on a rise. And gas is still higher today, you know, but they want to say it's come down. So if it's coming down from $5 a gallon to almost $3 a gallon, I wouldn't take credit for that, right? And it still hurts people. You know, we were still hurting at the supermarkets with shelves being empty. So there's a lot of things that are happening right now. So I believe the Biden administration and all the Democrats that are running across the country have to have an ability to somehow justify what this administration's policies have done. And I think they're going to have a very difficult time doing that because people have long memories. And it wasn't just that long ago, you know, that we weren't being able to fill up a gas tank or buy the foods that we needed or baby formula for all those things. All those things clearly reside at the feet of the Biden administration.
What do you think, Steve? Who's the bigger drag?
Well, I think the data are pretty clear on this. There was a poll, a number of polls this week, one that came out Friday morning, the New York Times Siena poll, that showed, first of all, in a head-to-head that Joe Biden would defeat Donald Trump 45-42. That number is beginning to increase. President Biden's approval rating has gone up 6 points in the last few months. We've seen a similar increase in 3 different national polls just in the last week. I'd be very proud to stand next to Joe Biden, and I think a lot of Republicans, including Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, would do anything to ask Donald Trump to just be quiet for a little while, because one of the reasons why the first midterm of a new president typically can be problematic is because it acts as a referendum, for better or worse, on the president. This is becoming a choice. It's a choice that we already had in 2020 between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We know how that came out in 2020. We know that Donald Trump and the way Republicans are acting, they would like him to stay away. I'm very pleased to have Joe Biden on our side. And if Donald Trump wants to continue to try to be the subject, that's going to be an issue. The nominees, including Don Bolduc, Caroline Leavitt, these are folks that are very proud of their affiliation with Donald Trump. They are doing nothing but continuing to drag Donald Trump into the middle of the conversation. You add that to the abortion issue that we touched upon earlier. New Hampshire is one of the most pro-choice states historically in the country. We now have Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, who has said, well, I know our rhetoric was make it a state issue, get the federal government out of it. I have a bill that would get the federal government squarely back into the middle of it again. Convoluted message that really presses the button of the worst fears that pro-choice advocates like myself and many others have had for decades. That's coming to fruition. And we see in all the polling and in the day-to-day, the conversations with voters, there are a lot of folks that were open for business that now are running back to Democrats. And the choice issue is a big part of the reason why.
Let's get into some of the races in the time we have left here. Steve Negron, how do you handicap this Senate race? Do you think some people are underestimating Don Bolduc?
I do, and I think that General Bolduc is a kind of he's a patriot and a warrior, and I have the utmost respect for him. But I think one of the things that has to happen is that people have to have an opportunity just to listen to Don Bolduc's message, right? I know we've already seen it. We're going to be flooded through the airwaves with things that are happening. And I think one of the things that Democrats try to do is insulate themselves from D.C., back up here in Washington, both whether it's Pappas or Custer or Hassan. And I think what Don's going to do is show that she's been in lockstep with this administration, which hurts the people here in New Hampshire. And I think Don's going to have a great chance come up here in November.
What about you, Steve? Hassan looks like she could be in trouble with the number she has.
Well, look, New Hampshire is traditionally a purple state. And Maggie Hassan has been named in the last several months as the most bipartisan senator in the U.S. Senate. I'm not surprised by that. I've known Maggie for over 20 years. She's a reasonable person. She always has been as a governor and now in federal office. And she has governed, legislated as somebody in the mainstream. And we should listen to Don Bolduc, who said for over a year that Donald Trump actually won the election, and then just yesterday, or Wednesday rather, said, actually, you know what, I've done a lot of research in the last few weeks. I don't know about the previous year, but in the last few weeks, he's done the research and determined that Joe Biden actually did get elected president. And so I would ask the people of New Hampshire, before we even get into the details like people's position on choice, where Maggie has a strong record as a pro-choice leader, and Don Bolduc has been very scary on the issue, including being very skeptical of even having exceptions like life of the mother and so forth. That is a stark difference. But who's in the mainstream? Somebody who thinks that Donald Trump, until a few days ago, won the election? Or somebody like Maggie Hassan, who has been named the most bipartisan senator in the United States Senate? I think that's the kind of choice people are looking at in November.
All right, Steve Marchand and Steve Negron, an inaugural Steve versus Steve. We'll see what we get to do again.
Absolutely.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you.